Morning, everyone. Look at this. It's 11. Oh, no, it's 11:01. All right, almost right on the nose there. On a Wednesday, which means it's time for Elevenses with the reps at Diesel. Welcome everybody who is joining us for the first time. And I clicked the button when it was still, yes, it does. That's right. Anyway, we're all here at Diesel with our wonderful publishers, representatives, and our fabulous booksellers every week at 11. And we grab our beverages, increasingly adult as time goes by, and our snacks. And we talk about books, new books, upcoming releases, old favorites, everything. We talk about it here every Wednesday with the experts. And your reading list will be growing much longer after you listen to them talk about books. It's fabulous, and it's also our little bookseller tent revival here every week. What's better than books, guys? Anything? Nothing. Nothing is better than books.
No.
That's why we're here. And so we of course, post all of the links to the books we're talking about in the chat bar over there, and we welcome any questions, comments, running commentary, rants. Well, maybe not rants, but unless they're rants about books. um, and so we welcome that. So feel free to ask questions and check in. We've got Joey behind the scenes there on the links. And so without further ado, let me introduce everybody today and we'll get going. Joining us today is Patricia Nelson from Princeton University Press. Thanks, Patricia. As always, lovely to see you. Our returning champion, Tom Benton from Penguin. Nice to see you, Tom.
Happy to be
Julia
here.
Callahan from Hachette. Thank you, Julia. And joining us for the first time, our bookseller, Liz, from up there. I don't know where she is, but somewhere, a secret location. But really happy to have you with us for the first time, Liz, and really excited to hear about your recommendations today. So let's get going, everyone. Patricia, why don't you lead us off today?
All right. Well, I'm starting with a book that is probably in the mail coming to me now as a final copy, but I'll show you the cover. The Girl in the Middle is the name of this book. Martha Sandweiss. It's a recovered history of the American West. This is an extraordinary book centered around a single ambiguous and disturbing image of a native girl surrounded by six powerful men. You might want to think about the power imbalance here and call on Rebecca Solnit to enlighten us here. This takes place at Fort Laramie in the Dakota Territory in May of 1868. The unnamed girl in the middle is surrounded by six powerful men, all of them Civil War generals with different roles in the post-Civil War West, in the Native American Wars, and in this treaty. It's a beautifully written microhistory of this very violent postbellum expansion of the United States. And it centers around this singular moment. The photograph is by Alexander Gardner, who is also a major figure in this book. So we are looking at the six generals, the girl, and Alexander Gardner. I happen to have a major book on Alexander Gardner published by Yale, and this has a great image, that image, in the context of all of the photographs that he took in this period, 1867 to 1868. Sandweiss is trying to unpack who the child is. While in the photography book, in the language of that time, she is identified as an Arapaho squaw. She is actually possibly only 8 years old. Sandweiss thinks she might be standing on a box under that blanket. She was possibly a translator. She is of mixed race, a Métis daughter of a French-speaking fur trader and an Oglala woman whose original family, first family, was actually murdered at Blue Creek by General Harney, who is standing there. Uh, Within this book are all sorts of extraordinary stories of a mesmerist channeling spirits of the dead, of a bilingual juggler at a Wild West show, of a child orphaned at Sand Creek and what became of her. It foregrounds violence against indigenous people, against enslaved people through the quite horrifying Southern slave owning General Harney, and violence to women. It is a book about the landscapes of the West. We're at the Harney massacre along the Platte River. We're at Sand Creek. We're at Wounded Knee, Fort Laramie, Pine Ridge. The book is an experiment in ethical, historical thinking, looking deeply at how we might look at all of the actors in this story. It's been beautifully endorsed by some of the most powerful names in Western history. Hampton Sides, for example, will be joining Martha Sandweiss at its debut launch event at Collected Works in Santa Fe, and he finds this book delightfully readable, finds our historian a first-rate sleuth in this haunting group photograph. We hear from Philip Deloria, who really sees this old picture unspooling the rich, painful canvas that was 19th century America. And we hear from Elliot West. I loved Elliot West's gigantic book, Continental Reckoning. It was definitely a big fat book on Western history. And this is the micro history that somehow manages to touch on everything that Elliot West did in Continental Reckoning. This single image spinning out from a detective story. So it's an exciting, beautifully written, highly personable book with many stories and with the story of the girl in the middle.
This just you've mesmerized everybody with this with this description. I think everybody wants to read this immediately. What an arresting image that is. That's amazing. And I think and the book sounds incredible. I haven't seen it yet. But also I think we can learn, I mean, those who, the whole quote about history and being doomed to repeat it. But delving into these parts of American history is really enlightening. And I think even without that amazing, arresting image, this is an idea that I think is important to investigate now and think about and understand, to give us better understanding of what we're going through now, right? So
there's a terrific reading list in the post-Civil War period, which I've been very engaged by for a very long time. It's a great, powerful period of history, important one to understand what happened to Western expansion, railroads, money, meat, packing,
all of it.
Land erosion. I mean,
yeah.
An enormous amount happened in the West, and all of that was acquired in terms of the United States, at quite a late date.
Right.
It's really, and this book just somehow manages to do something new.
Right. And I also am a big fan of microhistories, because it's that feeling of overwhelm that you sometimes get from a sort of weightier, longer type of book. It's like, wait, I'm not getting all of it. And a microhistory will just get you right in there. Tom knows all about the microhistories, since Penguin has quite a few really interesting ones. But I think that that's such a it's such a great avenue to explore also, if you really want to get sort of a quick and in-depth understanding of one part, and then that helps you move on to another part and gives you a broader view. So fascinating. So that should be on sale any minute, sounds like.
It's on its way, I think.
It's on its way. All right. Thanks, Patricia. All right, Julia.
All right. Well, I just now have like 5 different tabs open to order books. So thank you, Patricia.
Only 5
for that.
Yeah. Patricia, it's impossible. Like whenever Patricia is on, the reading list is expanded.
I know. I know. My wallet thanks you. So my first book is a novel. This is by Nathaniel Ian Miller. It's called Red Dog Farm. And some of you may remember or may have read the memoirs of Stockholm Sven when it came out in 2021.
All right.
It was a #1 indie pick. This is also an indie next pick, and a much lauded book. It came out last Tuesday. And it is the follow-up. It doesn't have anything to do with the memoirs of Stockholm Sven, except that it also takes place in Iceland. And it's his follow-up novel to that one. This is, I mean, really, it's kind of a love letter to, in certain ways, a love letter to farming and a love letter to people sort of farming in places that are fairly hostile to that. So Nathaniel Ian Miller is in Vermont, and he writes about, not in the book, but he sort of wrote about how when he went to Iceland for the first time and saw these farms, it reminded him of the Vermont farms where, you know, this is sort of a hostile environment to farm in. There's snow and, you know, the rocks and the, you know, all sorts of things that get in your way. And so this is really like his love letter to the people who do that. And in a lot of ways, it's a multi-generational sort of look also at, you know, moving away from farming and sort of agrarian existence. And so it's this touching sort of story about a father and son, sort of old world and new world perceptions of this father and son. And the son is choosing whether he's going to attend university or to help his father on this cattle farm. It's tender. It's, you know, it'll definitely make you feel a few things. And it's a gorgeously written book, and one, much like Stockholm Sven, he really dives into character in a way that is so touching, and so you just want to spend time with these people. So this is Red Dog Farm by Nathaniel Ian Miller. A great book, and I think one that people are going to sort of start handing off to each other as they finish it. So yeah.
Stockholm Sven was such a big store favorite. It really, all the books, everybody loved that book. But I think a lot of people picked it up, who would come in, and they would be like, I don't understand what is, what is this, about, because it's the title, I think, tripped people up a little bit, but then they got into it, and it was a big favorite. There's such a big demand for this kind of novel, this kind of story, I think. And I think Iceland has really become kind of randomly exciting setting of late.
Such a destination.
Yeah. It has actually become a destination. And then I don't know if you've ever watched any shows out of Iceland. It's really interesting. No, you gotta check it out. It's really, yeah, it's really interesting. So I think can't wait. I'm very excited for this one to fly right off the shelf. So thank you, Julia. All right, everyone's coming out hot. Tom, what do you got?
No, I'm gonna keep it hot, I hope. My first book is a novel called Goddess Complex by Sanjana Sathian, out yesterday. And she's the author. I was a big fan of her first novel, Gold Diggers. And the new book, it's always, I'm always nervous and excited for the second novel to see how we're progressing. And she delivers the goods with this book. This is very different. The first book was the coming of age of an Indian American boy. In the voice of that boy. Now she's looking at a 20-something Indian American woman who has left her. She's broken up with her husband. She's trying to decide whether or not to have children. Fertility, having children, not having children, all of these things are very much on her mind. So she leaves her husband back in India. She comes to America, where she's from. She's American, Indian American. But then she's trying to reach her now ex-husband. Can't reach him. Suddenly she's getting text messages from someone who is sort of like her doppelganger, someone also named, well, Sanjana, the author, is very playful. So the main character is named Sanjana, almost spelled exactly the same way. Anyway, so there's a doppelganger who is asking her questions about pregnancy. So the book is it's a satire. It's a coming of age. It's in a way, a thriller. Like she mashes genres in a really interesting, fun way that leads to a lot of discussion. This is going to be just like Gold Diggers. This is going to be a great book club book. So there's satire. There's a satire of influencers. This person that's trying to reach her is a pregnancy influencer. The doppelganger. So there's questions of IVF, motherhood, marriage, ambition, all these things in a really entertaining package. So the first part is set in America. Second part is when she goes to India to really get to the heart of what's going on with these characters. So I think this is for the readers. Definitely, Miranda July for sure, although younger. But also I think Mona Awad for the, outsize, craziness that is allowed to happen. But very satisfying, very entertaining, really great novel. So I'm excited that this is out now. Goddess Complex by Sanjana Sathian.
I'm excited for this too, because I was a fan of this book, as you know, Tom, right? Yeah. And I really enjoyed it. What I found, I think she's more accessible than Mona Awad, actually. There's something about Mona Awad
like she is very accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what grabbed me right away. When I picked it up, I was like, oh, this sounds like a lot.
And it is, right? It's still a lot.
It is. But the voice is so engaging immediately that it just really drew me in right away, and I think you're absolutely right about it being a great book club pick, and lots of avenues for discussion, especially the things that she's talking about are just so interesting and so multi-layered, but she makes it, I don't know, it doesn't feel like polemic in any way, or it's just,
there are big ideas, lots of big ideas, but it doesn't feel like it's a big idea book that feels light somehow.
Yeah, not light, but like this is life kind of a thing, and this is how we, honestly, you live your life, right, instead of separating yourself from your life and going, let me think about this concept that's happening to me, kind of a thing. And I think she does this really, really well. So great book. All right. Excellent. We're off to a very strong start here. And Liz, now we're going to hear from you about your first book.
I guess I'll get started with Agua Viva by Clarice Lispector. An absolute fever dream. In a lot of ways, it's about the fallibility of language. And this is something that I'm very interested in my larger project as a visual artist and a poet. There's this great essay by Fred Moten called Aunt Hester's Scream, where he sort of talks about this jazz song where this woman has this howl. And he talks about how that howl, that utterance, communicates more about Black pain than any sort of structured essay that he had read. And he talks about the importance of abstraction, and that language is just these collection of leaky containers, and that if we expand the bounds of them, we can communicate more about the human experience. And I think that Agua Viva really does that through abstraction. It compels you to read with the heart rather than the brain. And I don't know if that resonates.
Well, so we had her in the store as we did an author of the month kind of a thing, but
Uh-huh.
I would be curious to know how you, for somebody new to her writing,
Mm-hmm.
what would you right, she's a must read, Julia says, but I don't what's your way of explaining to readers what they're in for when they pick up one of her books?
Um, you're in for a heartfelt, uh, long form poem, pretending like posing as something else. You're in for a sort of dreamlike um, abstraction. Uh, I think fever dream again is like a really good way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
It's about emotion. It's about trying to find a way to communicate the complexity of the human experience uh, while acknowledging the fallibility of sort of conventional language structure. Um, yeah, it's hard to
So not
describe because
she's
it's
not
unlike
straight.
anything.
Yeah, she's not straightforward. It's not like necessarily a straightforward narrative then.
Yeah, it escapes conventional structure. Uh, sorry, I'm gonna step outside.
Yeah, so I'm not so Julia saying she's a must read, and it sounds fascinating, but right, and defying, classification is great. um I think, because it's unique, but also, for someone who hasn't read her, me, yet, I'm curious what what, like, comparable is there. Are there no comparable? There must be something comparable for readers of kind of a thing.
You know what? I think that's probably why I chose the book because it's unlike
Uh-huh.
anything I've ever experienced before outside of poetry. Like it's
Oh, okay.
really um confusing that it's in our fiction section because uh it's unlike any fiction I've ever read before. There's not like a linear narrative.
Right. Great.
Um
I mean, that works for me. you know and
it's really beautiful.
it's always interesting to me to see, when we look at, we've talked about this before, Edelweiss are where we go to look for, our, a lot of books that are pre-publication. Our booksellers get the inside scoop, and we get to see these things ahead of time. And poetry is always put in the nonfiction category, which I just find hilarious. And I think it's that kind of thing, right? What do we do with this sort of a thing? Well, you make of it what you do then, right?
Yeah. I I think I like that it's just it challenges you to sit with your confusion and find meaning in that sort of liminal space. Um, and that it allows you to have your own unique experience with the work and it isn't
Yeah,
like didactic about meaning.
right.
Um,
Great. Excellent. I love it. And all this, I know that's the other thing. They're slim. All of her work is they're slim, so it's not, you know,
they're
you don't
slim,
have
but
to sit
they're
with
they're
them.
challenging. They're really
Yeah, yeah,
challenging in that way. Sitting with something that defies conventional understanding for 88 pages can be a real challenge.
Absolutely. But, I think we're up for it. So,
it's so beautiful. It's
all
just
right. I
so
mean, beautiful
beautiful.
and, challenging and beautiful is great, I think. So, all
Yeah, I
right.
mean,
Thank you.
she's a painter, so she's
Uh-huh.
also sort of grappling with what it means to communicate visually. Her language is rich with visual metaphor, um, and I really identify with that as a visual artist as well. Translating visual language into traditional language is challenging. So,
All right. Thanks, Liz. Great first pick. Back to you, Patricia.
Okay. Well, I have a book to put everything in the broadest possible perspective. It is by a great classicist, Robert Garland, classicist of Greece and Rome. And he has, I think, done a very self indulgent book at this stage of his career, a charming book, an unexpected book. It's called What to Expect When You're Dead. The book is a tour of death and the afterlife. It's informed by wisdom and insights of the ancients and drawn from archaeology, art, literature, funerary inscriptions. He covers a vast range, of course, Greek and Latin, but also Egyptian, Hindu, Jewish, Zoroastrian, Etruscan, all of Mesopotamia, early Christian, Islamic. And from all this, he derives and kind of pulls in key chapters, which are nicely each settled as an essay on how we came to believe in the afterlife, how to achieve a good death, between two worlds, how to dispose of the body, how to live with the dead. He has a wonderful chapter on things to do when you're dead, and many cultures have made certain that you might have board games, some unguents, and certainly a good food supply, and possibly an army. You want to eat well, you want to look your best in the afterlife. He looks at commonalities across all of these traditions, compassion for the dying and for the deceased, respect for the dead, ancient practices which can help us with our own mortality. There's a seriousness, of course, and a breadth of scholarship, but it's written with a very light touch. His intention is to enliven the dead, to enlighten the living. Reading the dedicatory epigram is from Oscar Wilde. Chasuble says, "Your brother Ernest dead? Jack, quite dead. Miss Prism, what a lesson for him. I trust he will profit from it." So this is a book to help us think about death, which is something that Princeton likes to do. So I have to show you my Princeton mortality list. I began to compile this after selling books like How to Die in our Ancient Wisdom series by Seneca, also How to Grieve by Cicero, our recent book Playing Possum on how animals understand death, the great book by Thomas LaCour, The Work of the Dead, books like Life is Short, The Good Enough Life, What Do You Want Out of Life, Losing Ourselves, Would You Kill the Fat Man, Hopeful Pessimism, and etc. This is the entire list that so far that I have gotten together. So if you want to delve into this subject, delve into our backlist. Thank you.
Joey, have you got all of those links, Andy? Everything that, because you've talked about a lot of those titles on Elevenses, yes, and they're all fascinating. Just Playing Possum.
Yes, but on the other hand, in the aggregate, it's quite a lot of mortality.
No, it is a lot. Oh no, Joey has encountered his limit. But Playing Possum, that's fascinating. Really fascinating book about how animals understand death, and it really is like that's one that I've been reading, and it's really good. This is I think probably the reason for but since the beginning of life, humans have been trying to understand death, right? So that's, I mean, That's
Well,
that's a
would suggest that that is the question. That is the question that we think makes us human, is that we
yeah,
are conscious of mortality.
that's right. And so, makes sense that this is the list. But also there's a there's a quite a strong interest in all of these kinds of books. I mean, really, I see it all the time. And readers are fascinated by it, and they want to read more about it. The Playing Possum is a fascinating book. It's so interesting. So much we can learn from animals, right? But this one sounds great too. Really, how man has been dealing with this throughout, over time is really interesting. So, and again, things we can learn instead of trying to live forever, which is really super ghoulish. And who would want to anyway? But on that happy note, this looks great. Thanks, Patricia. And thanks for sharing some of the mortality list as well. All right. Back to you, Julia.
All right. Well, I have a sort of history as well for my next book. It's called Expect Great Things: How the Catherine Gibbs School Revolutionized the American Workplace for Women. And so this one, it actually reminded me, I'm not sure if you remember the book a couple years ago came out called The Barbizon, which was about the Barbizon Hotel.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This one, like, book. Yeah, and this has a sort of similar feeling to it because it is a women's history. It is all about the Catherine Gibbs School, which trained women for the sort of professional workforce. It trained women how to take stenography, how to type, how to basically it was secretarial work for the most part. But it sort of opened these doors for women, economically speaking, that had not been open to them before. And so, there were many sort of women in the working class that worked in factories and were working in all sorts of different factory jobs and stuff like that. But this sort of middle class of women getting brought into the professional class and sort of learning these skills. This was brand new, and Catherine Gibbs School trained women how to do these things, and it was very specifically they trained women how to do it. It's one of those things that even I'm in my early 40s, and my mom was trained in secretarial work, and so it's not all that far in the past. But I think what's so interesting about this book is talking about both how these women were trained, what this school sort of offered to women, and then also how those economic opportunities sort of opened a lot of doors for women to have economic freedom and to start to be able to make decisions about their own lives and start to sort of live maybe a little bit differently than they had been forced into living in the past. So this is a great book. The author is a Los Angeles-based author, so she's local. I believe she's at Diesel this week. She might have been at Diesel last week. I'm sorry, I should have looked that up. But I know she's doing something, an event with Diesel very shortly. So this is a wonderful one. And if you like a good women's economic history, this is a great one.
Joey's going to pop up the link there, but I don't think it's this one. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. Joey's going to pop it up in a sec. This is great for a number of reasons, but also because maybe it's a roadmap for where we're going to have to go back to and start after we don't have any of these freedoms anymore, and we'll have to look back and see how they started all over again. All right. No, I promised.
God willing that's not the way it goes.
I didn't see that coming, though I should have, Deborah.
I mean, all of them, all of them, hoard the books before, all right. No, not going down that road. Anyway, the Barbizon book was a surprising. I was like, I of course found it fascinating, but I was like, I don't know if this is going to go, but people loved it. And it actually got a much broader readership than I thought it was going to. And then there was that one about the flight attendants as well. which I can't remember the name of right now. But this is great. My mom knows shorthand also. She went to this kind of she got the same kind of training. And it's fascinating to me. It seems like so much we take for granted, right? That has been part of our consciousness for a long time. But this kind of, the beginning of these kinds of things, right, for women, so interesting. So a good read. Thanks, Julia. All right, Tom.
All right. So I have a Los Angeles author, Kim Fay, the author of Love and Saffron, which was a #1 Indie Next pick three years ago, I think.
Was it that long?
Maybe.
Wow.
2, but I think it might have been 3. I know. It's hard to believe.
What is time?
I know. Exactly. And I'm so excited that she's here with the new book, because if you love Love and Saffron, you will love Kate and Frida. So love it, and it's not. I would call it a companion to. There are Easter eggs for readers of Love and Saffron, but you don't have to have read Love and Saffron, though you should. Especially if you like novels in the form of letters. That's what both of these books are. So and they're love letters to food, both of them food, as you can see on the cover. This is also a love letter to Paris and bookstores. So we're all
everything.
We're all
got it all.
And also nostalgia for the past, pre-internet, the 90s. So we're in the 90s. It's like the early 90s. The internet.
The 90s is historical now.
Yes, right. The internet is not a thing, and so that's why you can write. In this case, you have a young woman. She's trying to be she's gone to Paris. Her plan is to become a writer and a war correspondent. She's from Los Angeles. Her bookstore, which is named in the book, is Dutton's Brentwood, which the late lamented Dutton's Brentwood. Now she finds herself in Paris, and she writes to Elliott Bay Booksellers and for a book. She's ordering a book, but she's writing a letter. And the bookseller who opens it is Kate, opens the letter, and so she sends her the book and a letter back. And that begins the correspondence between these two young women at this pivotal moment in their lives. It's infused, of course, with there are so many references to books and authors. I think of Laurie Colwin for sure, MFK Fisher. It's just, you just sink into it, and it's just an absolute delight. I mean, it's so lovely. And Los Angeles played a big role in the first book, and Los Angeles is in this book as well. But really, I love the idea. Kim Fay worked at Elliott Bay in the 90s, so a lot of it is taken from her own experience, her own life as a bookseller. So it's really well informed as a bookseller and the whole world of books. So pick it up. You will not be disappointed. Kate and Frida by Kim Fay.
I gotta say, booksellers write good books.
Yeah.
Booksellers, yeah. There's more of them. There's more of them than you think. Love and Saffron was such an easy sell. An easy recommend, I should say, not easy sell. We're not selling cars here. But it was such an easy recommend, and people loved it so much because it has such great heart. And this one is the same, I think. And there's a lot to be said for the epistolary novel, I think. It's the very form is kind of a throwback in its own way. It's kind of interesting to think about throwing back to the 90s.
I know.
But it does have all the things, and it really is just soothing. And yes, Patricia says 80 definitely has that vibe for sure.
Cross, right?
Yeah. And so I think it's going to be another winner from her, and I was really excited to put it out.
Yeah, it's really
on Tuesday.
And there are recipes because food, even though it's not quite as much about food as the first book, there are some of her recipes at the
Yeah,
end.
and that doesn't always work, when authors do that, put recipes, that can can be a bit twee, I think, at times, but it does work. It does work here.
Yeah, in this case, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Tom. Liz, back to you for your second book.
Hi, guys. Okay, so my second book is The Argonauts. I'm sure we're all familiar. Yes, many resounding head shakes. It's, when we think about the Argo, the ship of Greek mythology, we're thinking about this. It brings up this philosophical question. The ship is constantly changing part by part. At a certain point, it is a whole new set of parts. Is it still the Argo? What makes the Argo the Argo? Is it the parts, or is it what is it? And this book is essentially about a woman. It's about love, transcendent love, and this woman, Maggie Nelson, who I believe she won a Genius MacArthur grant for this writing. She's in a lesbian relationship, and her partner begins to transition. And at the same time, she is embarking on the experience of becoming a mother. So her partner's body is shifting and changing. Her partner is undergoing HRT, hormonal therapy, to transition from female to male. And her body is shifting and changing as she starts to grow a human inside of her. And it's sort of about this experience of queer identity, femme identity, and the dynamism of existing in a body, and the transcendence of love. It also is infused with a lot of philosophy and theory. It's structured in this way where there's like a lot of sort of footnotes, I guess you would say. And as somebody who, in my master's program, it was very theory and philosophy focused. So that is like a major interest of mine. So it combines my two favorite things, which is like critical theory and transcendent love. It's a beautiful book in that way. Also, again, challenging.
There's a theme, right? I was just going to say there's a theme in both of these books that you're recommending today, and that's that they're both the writing is beautiful, and they're also challenging. So
Yes.
and she really, Maggie Nelson really is, I think, like the embodiment of beautiful and challenging at the same time.
Yes,
you've got to
totally.
find a way in with her. It's worth it. But this one and Bluet, or I mean, I'm sure people say Bluets, but I like to pronounce it the French way. Which is a book that I really spent a lot of time with. And I think she is challenging, but I think that once you get in there, she's just so interesting, she's so interesting, and the language is really, really beautiful as well. So, also slim volumes, slim and challenging. This is a definite theme. But
I have a type.
Yeah, absolutely worth it. I mean, yeah, really, really good. And I think, and it's a good entry into her work in general, Maggie Nelson, The Argonauts. So, thank you, Liz. Excellent. All right, we're going to start our last round of the day with Patricia.
Okay. Well, we have the nice comment that the 90s was now history, but I seem to be pretty much in the Wayback Machine today.
The
I'm going to go back to
1890s.
the archaic Greek world, 750 to 480 BCE, and also with an intensely scholarly book, because sometimes it's just wonderful to give them their due, even though they are really over the top. So this one is called Beauty and the Gods. It's a gorgeous book by Hugo Shakeshaft, who seems to be a very young but insanely brilliant scholar. I think this might have been his massive dissertation. It is a book about gods as the fountainhead of beauty in human life, how that beauty was inextricably linked with the divine in this period of ancient Greek history, archaic beauty and its legacy. He's looking at Homeric epic, at lyric poetry, at votive inscriptions and vase paintings, similar to my last book, architecture of Greek temples, and making comparisons throughout. But it's an exquisitely beautiful book full of surprises. I'm looking at a quotation he has from the Homeric hymns at a moment when Demeter reveals herself. She has been disguised as a nursemaid, and suddenly, to the awe and horror of everyone around her, as she spoke, the goddess changed her height and appearance, casting old age aside, and beauty wafted all around her. A lovely fragrance spread from her scented garments. Radiance shone far from the goddess's immortal skin. Golden hair flowed over her shoulders, and the sturdy palace was filled with brightness like lightning. So this revelation of beauty he sees in moments in text and in image. We see Aphrodite, and wherever she walks, grasses spring up, flowers spring up. We see the groves, the sacred groves around the Delphic oracle. There are lots of wonderful images in the book, such as Greek vases, and of course, magnificent statuary. And he reminds us that we have continued these images throughout history. If we look at how we might portray the Christ, how we might portray Lincoln, we are still using the imagery of ancient Greece and the images of beauty. It's a surprising and beautiful book. I just got a lot of pleasure out of it. I might be in that mode right now, or maybe it's a self-protective mode. I got an advanced copy of the new Daniel Mendelsohn, a forthcoming translation of the Odyssey, which is coming from University of Chicago, and I just sort of seem to be on this kick. So this is a relatively obscure and yet surprising and beautiful book.
I don't think you're alone in being in that mode. Really seeing a lot of people coming in and saying, "Listen, I want to know more about the Greeks. just tell me more." But I just have to say, this guy's name is Hugo Shakeshaft. Really, that is a name. I'm sorry. I just needed to have like a slight aside there. That will get you some attention. This sounds wonderful. And what a great plunge, right? If you really want to just get lost in this kind of thing. I think it's a really wonderful idea, actually, especially to explore beauty. And also, if this was this guy's dissertation, like, really more power to him. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it. So excellent. Thank you so much, Patricia. All right, Julia.
All right, cool. So for my last one, I have a novel. It's called Liquid, a Love Story by Mariam Rahmani. Mariam is an LA-based author, and this is about Los Angeles, and it is a satire. It is hysterically funny. It is so wonderful. And it is about a woman who, she is an adjunct professor at UCLA. She cannot, on that salary, afford to live in Los Angeles, but she does, and is trying to make it. and she decides one day, she says, she's Persian, and so there's, if you know Tehrangeles, the Tehrangeles area of Los Angeles, then you'll recognize a lot of this book. But she says, in my culture, sort of, there's been arranged marriage for hundreds of years. Why am I like out here trying to find true love? And she decides that what she's going to do is she's going to go on 100 dates, and she's going to try to marry the richest person that she can possibly marry. And it is a hysterical send up of dating culture, of specifically Los Angeles dating culture, but online dating culture. It is a send up of the city itself. It is a send up of Persian culture and sort of Persian American culture in West LA. It is, I just cannot recommend this book highly enough. A delight of a novel to read. One that I feel feels very timely, and also sort of feels like a balm in this time. Yeah, Liquid: A Love Story by Mariam Ramani. I absolutely love this one, and I love a good satire, and I do think it's difficult to write a good satire, and this is a good satire.
It is difficult. I just was reading one that's coming out soon, which was like, this is maybe satire, but it's too close to the real thing, and it's bumming me out. So I had to put it down. I love this book though. This book is hilarious. It's hilarious. It's an escape. It'll really, it's transporting, and I was super excited. This was a great week for, I mean, new releases are always great, but this was a really terrific week for new releases. A lot of really, really great books this week, and this is one of them. So highly recommend as well. Yeah, just what we need. Yeah, thanks, Julia. All right, Tom, let's wrap it up for the day.
Okay, so Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle, which I love, is now out in paperback. And so if you missed it in hardcover, come to Headshot now. I mean, this was so I'll say briefly again, it takes place over one day in Reno. Each chapter is a boxing match between two teenage female boxers, and so it's tight focus. Each chapter is tightly focused on these two characters, the physicality, the intimacy of the boxing, and of their what they're trying to do. But what I really loved about this book is how it takes you inside the heads of these young women. It takes you into their past, what brought them to Reno on this particular day, why boxing is important to them, why this physical competition is so important. But then it also it has these flash forwards to where they are in decades from now, how it relates to that moment in Reno. It's really just a great idea for a book, pulled off brilliantly. And it's been so exciting to see this book be not short. It was on the long list for the Booker Prize. So many awards, so many lists. Obama's list. It was a finalist for the California Caliba's Golden Poppy Award. So it's one of these books that slowly but surely is finding its readers, and now that it's out in paperback, it'll go wide. So many great quotes I could give you, but one of them from one of my favorite writers, Pam Zhang, says, "Headshot is an extraordinary act of literary telepathy. With prose as muscular and gleaming as a body in motion, Bullwinkle drops readers into that roaring, incandescent universe that is young womanhood. This is a book with its own pulse." So get it now in paperback.
Yeah, just out Tuesday, and I know you were such a fan of this, and it was a sort of slow starter, this book. And it's funny because there've been a couple of, and I remember years ago, Hachette had a novel about women boxers, and it didn't really do anything. I don't remember the name of it right now, but with this one, and there was another one as well, and I was like, this is interesting. Is it a trend? And then, but this one really was the one that kind of stuck. Right. It got in there, and then I think in between hardcover and paperback, been more focus on women's boxing in general after the Olympics and all of that.
Yeah, that's true.
And people thinking about it, and it's really was a slow start, but it definitely like snowballed.
Yeah.
So I think it's gonna get. I really feel like it's gonna come into its own in paperback, and it's unique. It's really a unique perspective. It's topic. It's not something we read about all the time. So super interesting. Tom was banging this drum from the beginning. I know you really liked it,
I've talked
Tom.
about it
Yeah.
more than once on Elevenses.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I always listen to Tom when he's that excited about a book. So you should too. And on that note, we have reached the hour. And wonderful books. So much to think about and to read coming up. Thank you all so much for taking the time and telling us about them today. Patricia Nelson from Princeton University Press, Julia Callahan from Hachette, Tom Benton from Penguin, and Liz on the road, on the street, our woman on the street. Thank you. It was great to have you on Elevenses for the first time, Liz, and definitely not the last time. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Joey, of course, for doing the work behind the scenes, and everybody who joined us today. Yes, Ginny, it was good to see you pop in there, and you can always do the replay and go back for what you missed. Available forever on the internets. So we'll be back again next week with more books, more book talk, and hope you will join us then. In the meantime, everybody, have a great week. Stay dry, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.